Okay, thank you so much for providing me this opportunity to speak on women rights. And my topic for today's talk is women rights, who deserves what and who decides. Now, basically, as you can see that I'm raising the questions and we'll have to find the answer through the lecture. This is what I'm trying to do. Uh, it is often suggested that human rights and duties are two sides of the same coin, in the sense that when we talk about human rights, I mean, rights cannot be without duties, and duties uh, are definitely, I mean, like duties for a human being, duties as a citizen, duties as a mother, duties as a teacher, and so on and so forth. And I mean, when we have the duties of a teacher, for example, uh, and teacher is always a relational concept, and teacher means that there will be somebody who is taught, and the taught or the students will have some obligations and also some rights, in the sense that a teacher must teach to the student, and at the same time the students have the right to be taught. Therefore they are actually the two sides of the same coin. So rights cannot be without duties. So that's the first thing which I would like to draw attention to. But surprisingly and interestingly, in Indian context, traditionally, if we look at the tradition, then we find that we have the concept of dharma, and I mean duties, or Hindi mein we have this kartavya. They are actually basically the kind of I mean the concept traditionally is used as dharma, raj dharma, and then the dharma of a husband, dharma of a wife, dharma of a child, and so on and so forth. So we have this concept of dharma, and the concept of human rights actually was never a center of serious discussion in Indian tradition, nor it has been a problem for Indian masses. So it was taken for granted traditionally that the concept of right does not have any problem, because the right actually are, although they are two sides of the same coin, but we did not really give much emphasis, or there was not a problem, because it's a problem seen in the modern times. So it was never a problem in traditional Indian Indian system. And in modern India, human rights and women rights have been reconciled or discovered within Hinduism and its caste system. So this is a very modern phenomena in Indian context, in that sense that we talk about human rights and women rights. Now notice that I'm using the word human rights and women rights almost interchangeably. The reason is that women are human, and the discourse on human rights actually includes women rights. And in the same sense, the discourse of human rights includes all categories of human beings. So, in that sense, women also are human, and therefore they are actually included here. So, I will be using women rights and human rights actually interchangeably, because a large, I mean, almost large population of human are, I mean, if not 50%, sometimes even more than 50% are human. Therefore, when the in modern world, when the this human rights discourse actually became the prime concern, uh, so the same way India was also affected, and that is say around 18th century onwards. So in modern India, human rights and women rights have been reconciled or discovered within Hinduism and its caste system. Now, in Indian tradition, we have the foundation of Indian tradition is caste system, which necessarily generates tension and conflicts due to the complexity and multi-layered structure, and also since opportunities are not in abundance. Now, this is interesting in the sense that, of course, we all familiar with this multi-layered structure of India, and although I'm talking of Hinduism basically, but as we know that in most of the religions of origin from India, Indic religion as we call them, whether there's a Sikhism or Sufism or Jainism or Buddhism, all of them have this basic concept which is called Dharma, which I was calling as duty discourse. So the duty discourse and the human rights discourse. This is how I'm trying to look at it. So because of this human rights discourse, this within the Indian tradition and within the Indian context, it actually creates a tension and conflicts, and that's because of this complexity in the multi-layered structure of India. And the other part is that because the opportunities are not in abundance. Now, if the opportunities are in abundance, if the resources are really in abundance, then the conflict and the tension would be less. I'm not saying that it won't be there, but it will be less. But if the resources are scarce or resources are not in abundance, then the share which every human being needs to get would not be getting, and therefore the tension will be more and conflict will be more. So, in such situation, the question which I'm raising, the title of my talk, who deserves what and who decides, are extremely important questions. Which means that who are the people who deserve what? Because after all, right is basically what I deserve. I need to get something, or one need to get something as a matter of, as a claim, as a right. Why? Because one deserves that thing. So when somebody is claiming as a right, means that one deserves but one is not getting. Then only the meaning of the struggle of right actually makes sense. So this concept of deserving is extremely important. And then who deserves what? So first of all, who deserves? For example, if we are talking about scheduled caste, we are talking of women. We are talking of scheduled tribes. We are talking about different kind of classes of the society. Then we are talking about a disabled person. So that means as a human being or as a citizen of India, they deserve something, but they are not getting. And therefore, they will be claiming this as a right. So deserving, the concept of deserving is extremely important. Now the question is what? What do they deserve? It's not deserving, but I mean just deserving something doesn't mean anything. Deserving what? That's an equally important question. I mean, if I have already, say, a motor car, a car, uh, maybe I deserve it because I paid for it. But then a person who does not have a motor car uh, may also claim that he deserves it. But then, I mean, to get him the motor car or to help him in getting the motor car, now that will make some sense only when he does not already have it. But if he already has it, then it really doesn't make much sense. So, not that everybody deserves everything. That's what is the crux of the whole thing. And then who decides? I mean, the people who already have the motor car, do they decide? Or the person who does not have the motor car, he decides that this is what I deserve and I must get it. Very often it happens that, the political system decides who deserves what. And very often it's the case that, the parents decide that what you deserve. Very often, the society decides what you deserve, and so on and so forth. So these are extremely important questions, and I would like to raise this question and draw your attention that we face the most difficult question uh, in India today. That is, how to include the excluded and how to exclude the included. So, the concept of inclusion and exclusion, those who were excluded, those who do not have the have nots, those who do not have the facilities which what they deserve as a human being, they need to be included. And those who do not, and who have abundance of wealth, for example, from they should be excluded. Now, this is the whole problem of India today. And as you know, that by sort of some kind of system, devising some kind of system, for example, one example is income tax, that you sort of decide that who would be included and who would be excluded. So, at the core of this women rights debate, there lies a need to integrate the very being of of women as individuals. So when we are talking about women rights, we are talking about the women as an individual. And it's not simply an individual, but also as a person, a self, and the other. Other means me and the other. So the other with other who is also a self, other who is also a person, other who is also an individual, and she must be accommodated with the claims and the counter claims. And I mean, the women have to be included within the structure, the social structure, and her claims and the counter claims. I mean, that only her claims does not really define the women rights, but also the counter claims that others may also claim against her. So they also have to be included as rights to be creatively human, and they should be, so that the humanity is actually is developed in the sense that the core notion of this whole thing is being human. I started by saying that women are also human. Therefore, the core concept is being human, and being human means rational and free being, who the person who has the rational choice, who has the ability to think, to decide, to choose, and be able to do. So in that sense, I'm talking about the creatively human, the promise of mankind which gets threatened by any destructive self of the few in power. Now, if those people who are in power, the power could be political, social, or economical, or or religious. So those who are in power, they exploit their power, and they actually I mean, they destroy the whole the notion of humanity by violence and all sorts of things. So what we find in India today is more and more divide between self and the other, whether it's in the family or whether it's in the locality or it's in the society or it's at a political system level, we and the other, center, state, etc., etc. So at every level, the whole society is getting divided and divided and divided infinitely. So self and other are divided, and on this, in the name of democracy and secularism. So on the one hand, we are talking about democracy. On the other, we are also talking about secularism. But then, on the name of secularism, we divide the society. On the name of democracy, also we divide the society. Democracy means that the individual rights, and individual means me and the whole world, is divided. Now, if that is the meaning of this thing, then this destroys the whole structure. And actually, this is not what I'm talking of at all. And I'm actually talking about being constructively human, which means that we can make sense of human rights in constructing the humanity and not destructing the humanity. So the women are actually, if we look at women in India, then women are divided in as many as 7,500 groups on the basis of caste, religion, classes, backward classes, tribes, using Indian constitution itself, and any objective of women rights movement gets defeated on the way. So this is what I was saying, that it gets destroyed. The whole humanity gets destroyed. There's no automatic guarantee of success by mere existence of a democratic institution. So democracy actually gives the human rights. It makes meaningful, but at the same time, if we sort of use democracy in this process, I mean, in this sense, then uh, it's just the mere existence of democracy, and the name of democracy and secularism, the humanity is getting destroyed. So democratic institutions of like that of all other institutions depend on the equities of human agents in utilizing opportunities for realization. So, uh, I mean, as I said, human beings are rational and critical, rational beings who are free to choose, which means that they would be using the opportunities, utilizing the opportunities for realization of their aims and their goals. But that does not mean that they would destroy the humanity. Therefore, one need to look at the democratic kind of structure which actually which seems to be ideal in present times, in the modern times. Now, let me talk a little bit about our history. Most of thinkers of modern India, I mean, as I said, that it started with modernity, say from 18th century onwards. So the thinkers of modern India, being before independence and around independence, were concerned with the idea of India and the future of India. For example, Gandhi talked about Hind Swaraj, Tilak talked about Gita Rahasya, and Tagore presented critique of narrow nationalism. Now, these are all expressions of ideas beyond India's independence. What model of development to be adopted in India? That was their concern, basically. And they also raised relevant questions, and all those relevant questions actually are relevant even today. So the basic question is the same even today. What direction we should adopt to realize our cherished dream of all round development in the lives of our countrymen, including women. So women cannot be left alone. I mean, women also have to join the hands in the notion of development of the country. And so that was the concern, before independence, and also for all these our modern Indian thinkers, and it's still today is the same. Even after 70 years of independence, there's hardly any ideological consensus on socialism, Marxism, liberalism, capitalism, and welfare state with democratic values. So, I mean, as you can see in parliament, all these discussions, we have so many parties and we keep on fighting with each other, and there's hardly any consensus. Yet, some aspects of these ideologies have been integrated. Now, each one of these ideologies have some truth, and almost all parties have adopted some of these isms and as democratic values. And yet, some aspects of this ideology have been integrated in the Indian constitution. And if we look at our Indian constitution, we find that some aspects from all these ideologies have been, uh, uh, I mean, not they are accepted as in total, but some aspects of it are included. And they are taken as Let me also discuss all these polarities actually among which we have to live. And uh, the polarities, uh, the polarities like modern versus ancient, foreign versus indigenous, West versus East, and ours versus theirs, individual versus society, mind versus body, intellect and soul, microcosm and the macrocosm. Now, they all can be dissolved or integrated in principles termed it dharma. So, the tradition tells us that all these polarities they are all integrated. They are not sort of against each other. These are not conflicts. They have to be seen as integrated. And dharma is what? Dharma is law of life. It's a foundation of all the religions and religions of Indian origin, as we have already said, and all those principles which bring about harmony. Dharma is something which brings harmony, peace, and progress in the life of mankind, and they are included in this dharma. So this is the sound basis of dharma. Now, if that is the sound basis of, this is the sound basis of Indian society, Indian tradition, Indian system, then we must proceed with the analysis of life. Now, this is only theoretical, as we are saying. So, if that is the case, then we must proceed with the analysis of life as an integrated whole. If dharma is integrating force, if dharma is the principle which integrates all the polarities, then if that is the sound foundation, then it and which is an integrated whole, then dharma should be guiding principle for our thoughts and actions. And the question is, does really dharma guide our actions and thoughts? What it means to insist that dharma sustains the cosmos. We often find this expression that dharma sustains the cosmos, regulates and regulates the cosmic process, and helps in realization of all-round development. Now, if that is the case, then how one realizes the dharmika individual? Now, if this is the case, then how do we implement these ideas into our life? How do we have dharmic society? How do we have dharmic nation? How do we have dharmic world? Now, these are the questions which we have to raise in Indian context. In the new paradigm of world order, with the spirit of spiritual globalization, often been suggested by contemporary thinkers, only an ideal, a demand of spirituality and rationality, or this is also a practically feasible and can be actualized in the daily life. So we have to ask: is this just a spiritual kind of ideal, or this can be actualized in the daily life, and it can be actualized in the daily life of an Indian women? These are some of the questions we need to look for answers. Now, a long debate between scholars have been and still continuing, as I have said, whether the concept of human rights or women rights can be consistently developed within the caste system. It's a long history. I'm not going into the history, but I'll just talk about one of you. Only few thinkers who have really concentrated on this. B.R. Ambedkar, actually, as you know, who was the architect of our constitution, Indian constitution. B.R. Ambedkar, who himself was born as untouchable, played the vital role in drafting Indian constitution, which include the rights of equality, right of right to freedom, right against. Now these are all human rights, as you can see. So, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, right to property, and right to constitutional remedies challenging all forms of inequalities prominent in India, including gender inequality, making it much wider than fundamental rights. So, but then as you can see that, and you know perhaps, that he was of the opinion that human rights or women rights cannot be reconciled within Hinduism. And realizing this in his life, Hinduism means that Hinduism with its caste system. So he converted himself to Buddhism. Now, this was the very strongest kind of action which he took in life, realizing that these ideals, the concept of dharma, which actually is practiced, although it is also practiced in Buddhism, but within Hinduism, he was sure that this cannot be actualized. But at the same time, the other scholars like Radhakrishnan thought that if democracy is to be seriously implemented, democracy means that you have to accept the human rights. So democracy is to be seriously implemented, then caste and untouchability should go. So even Radhakrishnan accepted that if human rights or I mean democracy has to be accepted, then the caste and untouchability must go. It cannot remain, and yet we can solve. Now let us also talk about Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay. Pandit Dindayal Upadhyay says that the definition of democracy to say that it is government of the people is not enough. So democracy is what? It's a democracy is the government of the people. Sharmaji Upadhyay says that this is not enough. It has to be for the good of the people. And good of the people means all the people, including women. What constitutes the good of the people? Dharma alone can decide. So, what is good of the people? That will be decided by the Dharma. Therefore, a democratic government, and he calls it Janarajya, a democratic government, which is called Janarajya, must also be rooted in Dharma. So, he talks about extensively about Janarajya. And he also talks about Dharmaraj. In the definition of democracy, that is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, this should stand for independence. By stands for democracy, for indicates dharma. So, for the people means that it is dharma. So, it's for the sake of dharma, the democracy stands. Therefore, for even Upadhyayji, the true democracy is only where there is freedom as well as dharma, encompasses all these concepts. So he develops a kind of a demo concept of democracy, which actually encompasses dharma. And his book is called Integral Humanism, which is published in 2016. You can have a look at that. So there's another approach which suggests rather than doing away with the caste. So these people were against the caste system, as you can see. But then there was another approach who were saying that instead of doing away with the caste, the human rights can be derived from the caste system itself. Among these, the most well known was Mahatma Gandhi. Although he asserted that human rights are in opposition to the caste system, while he was campaigning against untouchability. So he was actually, in a way, he was against caste system. And then he was against untouchability, as you know, against, I mean, the Harijan Shabd. Harijan, I mean, he really wanted to include Harijan within the society. So he accepted the Varna system. He was against the caste system, but he accepted Varna system based on birth and by implication the caste system, but denounced untouchability. He did not see caste system as advocating inequality. A number of other scholars like Panikkar, J.B. Karman, etc., and many others actually talked about some kind of universal basis for human rights and women rights. And they talked about universal duties like Satya and Ahimsa. Uh, but the important point that these scholars were making was that Hindu thought draws our attention to the human rights discourse as rights and duties are as integrated whole. So as you can see that these authors, I mean these thinkers actually, they tried to include human rights dimension into the duty discourse, which was traditionally absent. So as you can see that in the modern India, people try to bring human rights discourse into the duty discourse within the traditional way of looking at dharma.